service hours and details.
Let's jet set.
1 minute your schedule is packed. The next, it's looser than cream corn. What's a time-crunched globetrotter to do? Well, simmer down now. Just hightail it to Priceline.com, name your own price, for airfare to the destination of your dreams, and usually get your answer in 15 minutes or less. Priceline.com. Relieve stress on contact.
Save up to 40% or more on airline tickets. Priceline.com.
When you head for work, depend on the station with traffic and weather on the 7s. Newstalk 780 KOH.
Time saver traffic and weather together, as you just heard. What else can we say? Here's Ian Terry.
Here's what's happening on the roadways at this point. I-80 east and westbound, picking up just a bit, a moderate flow of traffic there. And picking up on southbound 395, moderate to heavy flow traffic at this point there. Watch out for road construction still going on Parr Boulevard this morning. That's going to be happening through to the 21st of this month. And there's also north and southbound lane restrictions on the Pyramid Highway this morning. I'm Ian Perry, News Radio 780 KOH.
I'm Sam Shad, KOH Sheriff Scan weather for Reno, Sparks, and Carson City and the lake today. Cloudy skies, slight chance of thunderstorms late in the day. High today for State Line 73, and in Reno 82 degrees.
Right now 55 at KOH.
Today's the perfect day to enjoy Napa Sonoma lunchtime salads, sandwiches, and refreshing drinks in their comfortable Wine Country Cafe. Napa Sonoma Independence Square on Moana Lane.
It's 6:10 on the Breakfast Club.
Northern Nevada's talking on the Rusty Humphrey Show.
Have you ever had a boss from hell?
I have, and I had increased my sales twofold, and I had to increase my margins twofold. So when they called me in to do my year-end evaluation, I thought I was going to get praises and you know,
sure,
pats on the back. And this CEO of this company started off right off the bat in a tirade.
Rusty Humphreys, afternoons 3 to 6 on Newstalk 780 KOH. University of Phoenix, education at the speed of life.
Come on, Mom. I have 3 kids, a husband, and I work full-time. University of Phoenix made it possible to earn my degree while still working and spending time with my family. I finished my education in just 2 years.
Designed for working adults, University of Phoenix lets you earn your bachelor's or master's degree in the most efficient way possible. You attend classes at convenient times. You study with other motivated professionals and complete challenging real-world projects. And you earn a leading-edge degree in technology, business, education, nursing, or management.
There are a lot of big reasons for earning my degree at University of Phoenix, but in the end, I did it for the little ones.
Come on, Mom, let's go.
Tired of letting promotions pass you by? Then call 828-7999 University of Phoenix, Reno. Class attendance is just 1 night a week, and most students finish in 2 years or less. What are you waiting for? Call 828-7999 or visit their campus at 5370 Kitski Line.
You're listening to Ross and Monica. Rush Limbaugh.
Just admit it's a tax increase.
This morning at 9 on News Talk 780 KOH.
It is 6:11. And we have breaking news at this hour. The World Trade Center is on fire. Explosions after an airplane crashed into one tower. A second explosion came after an aircraft crashed into the upper floors of one of the World Trade Center towers this morning. And it appears now that a second plane hit the other tower. This is causing some speculation that it was a deliberate act of terrorism. Plane crashing into the second tower. We do not know any casualty reports or deaths, but an explosion has rocked the World Trade Center, engulfing the top floors in smoke and flames. And the FBI is now involved and reporting reports of a plane hijacking before the World Trade Center crashes just about 30 minutes ago. So again, both towers of the World Trade Center in Manhattan on fire. Both towers believed to have been hit by airplanes. And the second one, airplane, appeared to be a rather large jetliner. And we are eyewitness accounts telling us that a twin-engine passenger plane crashed into one of the towers. The upper floors at this hour of both towers engulfed in smoke. Debris continues to cascade toward the street. Video that was shot of the first tower on fire clearly shows the silhouette of a very large aircraft heading for the second tower. Not known exactly how big those planes are that hit both towers, but again, word that a plane hijacking may be involved. KOH News Time, 6:13.
Hello, this is Rob Castor from Ace Furnace. I know there are many people in northern Nevada that have no idea of all the health problems associated with contaminated air ducts. The Environmental Protection Agency has documented that indoor air circulating through your home can be up to 70 times more polluted than outdoor air. Look at it this way. Your air ducts are a dark, damp area that hasn't been cleaned since your house was built. This is a prime breeding ground for many biological molds and contaminants. All the air circulating through your home passes over these contaminants, exposing you and your family in every room in your home. Changing air filters is important to catch dust particulates, but it oftentimes will not catch the contaminants that make you sick. At Ace Furnace, we specialize in cleaning and sanitizing air ducts in all types of homes and businesses. Health problems caused by indoor air pollution affects us all. The good news is that our unique methods for cleaning and purifying air ducts will keep you and your family safe and may just keep you healthy through the flu season. So call Ace Furnace at 882-9491. That's 882-9491.
Wait a minute. You mean you haven't come over to Reno Dodge yet to get one of our 2001s before they're all gone? You are dangerously close to missing out on the most lucrative customer cashback free-for-all of all time, my friend. It's crunch time, man. So if you want to get way more cash back, way huger dealer discounts, way lower long-term financing, and more bonuses than any other dealer can give you from here to eternity, then get over to Reno Dodge and lock it all in for yourself right now. Because this is your last window of opportunity to turn in your old trade, get a new Dodge, triple your rebate, pocket all that Dodge customer cash, reduce your monthly payments, and save like never before. This is Joe Scalia. You want a 2001 Dodge? You want to cut your best deal ever? Then get in here this week, man, to the most lucrative 2001 sell-off ever. Only at the one and only Reno Dodge on Kitsky Lane.
Breaking news when it happens on Newstalk 780 KOH.
Both towers of the World Trade Center in New York rocked by explosions this morning. The FBI investigating reports of a plane hijacking before one or both planes crashed into the two towers of the World Trade Center about 18 minutes apart. We now join ABC's Peter Jennings live in New York.
What do you see?
I am west of the two buildings, looking directly at them, and it's difficult to look at. I'll tell you that much.
This is not an area which is easy to reach for emergency services. These two buildings hug the Hudson River. There's only the West Side Drive that comes up there. Is there a large amount of emergency equipment descending on the place?
There sure is. As soon as I got out of the building, obviously the first thing you're surrounded by is siren noise everywhere, and you can hear it coming by now, even still.
Anything else you know that you'd like to add?
Just as I was coming out of the building, I heard somebody sort of ushering people away, and they were saying, you guys got to get out of here, it's a bomb.
Many thanks, Lindsey Grimm, who saw this occurring, at least the first, hesitate to call it an attack. The first incident, we'll continue to call it for now, and very much the second one now. That's what it looks like. Both of the towers in the Twin Trade Towers are now on fire. We have no idea whatsoever the measure of casualties inside or the measure of damage inside, though you can only imagine it. The New York City Office of Emergency Management said they do not know what happened yet. Want to check in very quickly with the President of the United States, John Cochran, who is the President in Florida. John?
Peter, as you know, the President's down in Florida talking about education. He got up out of his hotel suite this morning, was about to leave. Reporters saw the White House Chief of Staff, Andy Card, whisper into his ear. Then reporters said to the President, do you know what's going on in New York? He said he did, and said he will have something to say about it later. His first event is about a half an hour at an elementary school in Sarasota, Florida.
Thanks, John. John Cochran with the President. President's in Florida today pushing his education reform. It will get wiped off the agenda today in view of this extraordinarily serious accident. For those of you who don't know, the Twin Trade Towers, and it's a popular destination for tourists when they come to New York City. It has financial offices in it. It has government offices. It has lots of access on the top above where this incident actually occurred, where tourists come. It's one of the great views in New York City, and people gather there, certainly at the foot of the building, fairly early in the morning, to be able to go and see it. The two collisions. The two incidents have occurred about 2/3 of the way up. John Miller, we haven't, we haven't had a aircraft fly into a building in New York, as far as I know, since just after the Second World War, when
The Empire State Building.
when it flew into the Empire State Building.
That's right. A B-52 flew into the Empire State Building then, and this is really the first time there's been anything like that since.
John, I was listening as you and Chris Isham, the head of our investigative unit, wandered up here to the rim just a short while ago to saying, one of you, I think, this is something they've been waiting to happen. Who are you talking about? What are you talking about?
What we were talking about is there's been a great frustration since the bombing of the World Trade Center, which the suspects later told federal authorities were intended to take the building down, that it didn't have a larger effect. And U.S. intelligence, FBI people for years have heard that they've always wanted to try and finish that job off, to take the buildings out, and that it was another viable target. Interestingly, ironically, whatever you want to call it, the World Trade Center just hired 2 weeks ago the head of the FBI's National Security Division for Counterterrorism in New York to augment and take over their security, pretty much aware of the level of threat that this is as a symbolic target.
One of the things that anybody mounting security in the World Trade Center himself will not be able to necessarily appreciate is what has happened at some distance. And there are a couple of reports, speculative at the moment, drifting around, including one on the Associated Press, which says the FBI is investigating reports of a plane hijacking just before the World Trade Center actually crashed. And John McWethy, our national security correspondent, is with us in Washington. John, what do you know?
Peter, we do hear that there was a hijacking. It is not clear where that hijacking occurred at this point, but it is one of the many things that U.S. officials are scrambling to try to get a handle on at this point.
Anything else, John? What happens at the Pentagon at a moment like this? I know everybody springs into action, but what do they do?
What happens is there is a particular counterterrorism cell within the Joint Chiefs of Staff that goes into an emergency basis at this point. They're investigating all aspects of air traffic in the area, all intelligence that, as they sift through it, may have given them some indication that something was happening. At this point, though, there were no warnings, they say, this morning. As they go back through this information, they may cull through it and find some clue, but at this point, they believe there is no warning.
Thank you.
You're listening to live coverage from ABC News. Two planes have crashed into the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan in New York. I'm Jim Hickey. You were just listening to a conversation between ABC's Peter Jennings and National Security Correspondent John McWethy. And as Peter reported, the Associated Press is now reporting that officials say the FBI is investigating reports of a plane hijacking just before the crashes, just before the two planes crashed into the World Trade Center. No indication of if there indeed was a hijacking, or if there was, where it came from and where the hijacking took place. We'll correct something we said a little while ago, that there had been a bombing at the World Trade Center in 1993. That is indeed true. It was not by a plane, however. It was the bombing in the basement in the parking garage of the World Trade Center in 1993 that killed 6 people and injured many others. We still have Brian Lutz with us on the line, who's in Lower Manhattan, where there's a great deal of confusion. Brian heard and saw the explosions and was talking to us when the second plane smashed into the second tower. Brian, can you give us an update of what's happening there right now?
It's hard to hear you. There's obviously mass confusion. Flames have now started to erupt from the north tower, both below and to the right of the diagonal gash, and above and to the left of the lower diagonal gash. They're coming out of both sides of the building now. The smoke is incredibly intense, incredibly black. I can see that the south tower, the fire has definitely picked up some strength, and debris is just falling off the building. I mean, it's unbelievably scary to see these chunks. I mean, if I see a chunk that size, you must imagine it's 3 or 4 feet long. It's twirling like helicopter blades. I just heard another explosion. It may very well have been something inside. The second explosion was so loud and so forceful that we felt the heat come through our windows, which is we are about 7 blocks north, and our upper floor faces the Twin Towers exactly. I can see the South Tower. I can see about 70 floors, the upper 70 floors, and the North Tower I see about the upper 40 floors. The gash in the tower is about 45-degree angle, and it's got to be 250 to 250 feet at about a 40-degree angle. And I can see with my binoculars, people are screaming, get out of the streets below me. There's tremendous confusion. I can see a huge chunk of airplane that's about, appears to be maybe 10 feet in from the skin of the tower. The flames are spreading rapidly on the north side of the East Tower. Do you have any questions? I mean, I feel like I'm just
no, you're doing just fine, Brian. Brian Lutz is an eyewitness in Lower Manhattan who saw both explosions of the World Trade Centers. And what Brian is telling us, the facts, as he knows them, as he witnessed them. There's a great deal we don't know. As we say, the FBI, according to the Associated Press, is investigating reports of a plane hijacking before these crashes occurred. Again, continuing with the AP report, a senior government official says the agency is pursuing reports that one or both of the planes were hijacked and that the crashes may have been the result of a suicide mission. The source stressed that the reports are preliminary and officials certainly do not know the cause of the crashes yet. But a second government official, unnamed, told the Associated Press it certainly does not look like an accident. Now, that is all speculation. There is no knowledge now whether it was intentional or whether it was an accident. But if it was an accident, it's incredibly just incredible that 2 planes would crash into both towers of the World Trade Center, 2 of the tallest buildings in New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. The second plane is actually caught on videotape by hovering TV helicopters as they were filming the first World Trade Center on fire. You can see the second plane approaching from what appears to be the west, banking slightly and headed directly for the second building. It disappears from this camera angle behind the building, and seconds later there is a tremendous explosion from the other side of the building, windows blown out, a huge ball of orange and red flame, and smoke then comes billowing out of the upper levels of the second tower. Both towers now on fire, gaping holes in the upper levels of both towers of the Twin World Trade Center in downtown Manhattan, in Lower Manhattan, that is, down near the World Trade Center area, down near Wall Street. We can see the looks like pieces of debris sticking out from some of the windows in the upper area of the World Trade Center. Now we're going to rejoin Peter Jennings, who continues with our live coverage from ABC News.
And Kennedy and Teterboro and Westchester, they've essentially asked all airports within a 20-mile radius to put a hold on anything taken off.
Teterboro Airport, which is in New Jersey, just on the west side of the Hudson River, and Westchester, which is maybe 40, 50 miles north.
Peter Jennings now speaking with John Nance, who is himself a commercial airline pilot and an aviation analyst for ABC News.
Because they're all controlled by air traffic control towers, and they can put a halt to the operations with one phone call.
Okay, John Nance, thanks very much. Call us back, will you, if you learn anything.
Peter, one of the difficulties they're going to face, as you can glean from this picture here, is the people who are trapped and need to be rescued are on the upper floors, but you see the plume of smoke covers the roof. The last explosion was at the bottom of the building and the smoke rose up, but they were able to make a series of daring rescues by landing, and they've trained for this and retrained, landing police helicopters on the roofs of the Twin Towers and pulling people out. it's going to be very difficult, since the roofs are now enveloped in smoke, for the police helicopters, which are arriving at a landing zone now just below the World Trade Center, to be able to get up there till that smoke dissipates. And that's where they had expected to pull a lot of people out this time, because they had so much success the last time.
Similarly, John, if you look at the two buildings, it does appear that at least in the northern tower there, or the left tower as you see it on the screen, below the incident.
You're hearing live coverage of the World Trade Center disaster on Newstalk 780 KOH.
Tremendous, terrifying walk down in a darkened building. But we'll at least be able to get out on the ground. By the way, Claire Shipman, ABC's Claire Shipman just called in. She's been checking with the FBI. She also says that the FBI had no warning whatsoever. Their crisis management operation in Washington is in place in conjunction with the Federal Aviation Administration. They are all now, which makes perfect sense, focusing on the recovery of survivors. The New York Stock Exchange has delayed indefinitely its opening today. This will just have not only an extraordinary effect on the national psyche, one surmises, dissimilar perhaps, but from what happened in Oklahoma City, but a very clear reminder to those of us in the United States that terrorism of a huge magnitude, with which we're somewhat more accustomed in the Middle East and in Africa, given the attacks on the U.S. embassies a couple of summers ago. But a reminder again that as far as international terrorism is concerned, and people's anger and even desperation on this occasion with the United States is going to find itself manifest here on U.S. soil. John, here's the president now in Florida. I wonder if everybody knows there what's going on. We'll listen to him.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I unfortunately will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary Rod Pace and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today, we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
President George Bush speaking at an event in Florida, and as he just said, he calls it an apparent terrorist attack against the United States of America, and he says terrorism will not stand, and that the people responsible for this apparent terrorist attack will be hunted and tracked down. Now, there are several reports coming in that the World Trade Center was attacked by at least one hijacked airplane. Reuters is now reporting that the hijacked plane came from Boston. However, that is unconfirmed. None of these reports is confirmed at this point. But President Bush now upping the ante, or at least apparently confirming what so many people had feared, that this seems to be a terrorist attack and not an accident, an incredible accident. Two airplanes crashing into both twin towers of the World Trade Center within moments of each other. One happening shortly before 9 o'clock Central Time. 9 o'clock Eastern Time. The other smashing into the building as cameras were rolling shortly after 9 o'clock Eastern Time. That second plane smashing into the number 2 tower, creating a huge, horrifying ball of flame and smoke in the upper towers. Smoke continues to billow from the upper levels of both towers. This thick black smoke thoroughly obscuring the roofs of both buildings, making it impossible for any rescue attempt from at least the top of the buildings by helicopter, because there's simply no place to land, no place a helicopter pilot can see even where to land. We were told by eyewitnesses before that huge pieces of debris helicoptered down to the street, smashing into the street. The World Trade Towers are 110 stories tall, and the airplanes crashed into the very upper levels. It appears to be in the upper 90s levels of both buildings. Let's go back now to Peter Jennings, and as we continue our live coverage of this horrifying event.
Located in the World Trade Center complex, although not in the Twin Towers.
Just
right
north,
next door.
North of the Trade Towers,
right.
in the World Trade Center, in the other Northern World Trade Center there. And on an occasion like this is not one they absolutely anticipate when they got going. They're talking very concerned with chemical and biological warfare. They've got extensive plans about that, which they very often demonstrate to the press. I'm going to interrupt myself and everybody else for a second, because one of our senior producers, Mark Obenhaus, is on the phone, and he saw the incident. Mark, do you hear me?
I do indeed, Peter.
Go ahead.
Well, I was leaving my house to go to work, and I walked down the street to go to the subway. I was at the corner of Franklin and West Broadway, and as I was approaching the subway, a tremendous roar went over my head, and I looked up immediately, and it was a plane, and much lower than I've ever seen a plane in Lower Manhattan. And it was a large plane. I couldn't identify it as anything specific except that it was a commercial jet, certainly. And then my eyes followed it, because this is approximately 15 blocks from the World Trade Center, and it just slammed right into it and was completely engulfed by the building. It was extraordinary. No wings flew off, nothing like that. It just went directly in, creating this sort of cavern-like hole, and suddenly then big flames started protruding from it, and then of course smoke, and then debris started just catapulting. And of course the area that we're in, there's a great deal of foot traffic, and people are just approaching and beginning to just gasp at just the sight of the building itself. Even if they hadn't seen it, the actual incident, the actual impact, just the sight of this huge building engulfed in flame with this massive cavernous hole in the side of it. And we stood there, I can't tell you the amount of time, I would estimate to about 15 minutes. And of course there's all kinds of services coming down, fire department and so forth. And then suddenly, from my vantage point, which would be north of the building, the far tower suddenly explodes in flames. Yet again, a similar kind of an event. And I now see, I've run down the street to my home where I have the television on, and I saw that too was another airplane. From our vantage point, you couldn't tell what exactly it was that hit the second tower, but it was a similar, seemingly almost like bomb blast, and with flames and debris protruding wildly from the building.
Mark, let me ask you a couple of more specific questions. You now confirm for us, I think, that it was the first attack on the tower that you saw.
Yes.
What direction was the aircraft coming from?
It was coming from the north.
It was coming from the north down over Manhattan itself?
Yes. It would have been flying roughly over the west side. I'm on, as I say, West Broadway, which is probably a quarter mile from the river. So it was on a direct path north, from the north, into the North Tower.
Do you remember where
ABC senior producer Mark Obenhaus, who was an eyewitness to the incredible events, speaking with ABC's Peter Jennings. On the line with us now is ABC White House correspondent Ann Compton, who is with the president in Florida, and the president seems understandably shaken by this, Ann.
The president is dramatically shaken by this. When word came confirming the second plane crash, President Bush was sitting in a classroom of second graders, and his chief of staff, Andy Card, came and whispered to him, and you could tell by the look on his face he was appalled. The president has immediately called the vice president and the FBI and started the wheels of government in motion. He is returning directly to the White House. The president has often spoken of the dangers of terrorist attacks on the United States, but one as dramatic as using commercial airliners and hitting populated areas like this is, again, simply appalling to the president.
And, of course, the president did call this an apparent terrorist attack. This is going to be a significant challenge for his presidency and the White House, as was the original bombing of the World Trade Center, Ann.
And think, too, of the times such as the bombing of the Oklahoma City building, where a president is immediately called upon to insist that the U.S. government will not stand for terrorism at home or foreign involvement. And in this case, the president has hit really the first major crisis of his administration. He canceled his event speaking to students at the school, saying only in a message to Americans that their prayer, he asked for a moment of silence, asked for their prayers for the families and the victims of this tragedy. But you can see now the government springing into action, looking for the causes, the perpetrators, and a full political press by this administration to let this not go unanswered.
And now the president says that he and you and all the reporters covering him will be heading immediately back to Washington, cutting his Florida trip short.
The president has decided to return to the Oval Office where he can best manage the United States response. And he's doing so, cutting short this Florida trip. We're in the motorcade now, moving toward the airport. But he will certainly have aides, advisors, the vice president, and others standing by in Washington, helping him to handle this. But this is a time when a president has two roles: to make sure that the resources of the federal government are keenly focused on this, and the other is to lead the nation in mourning and in shock of this kind of attack on American civilians.
ABC's Ann Compton traveling with President Bush, who is in Florida, cutting that Florida trip short, where he was talking about education, and heading straight back to Washington, straight back to the White House to handle this, what he calls this apparent terrorist attack against the United States. Lots of reports coming in now. A couple of reports are that one of the planes that crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center was an American Airlines 767 that was hijacked out of Boston. There is no confirmation of that, no confirmation if that is indeed the case, but at least two news agencies are reporting that. Another report, according to the New Jersey State Police, all the Hudson River bridges and tunnels leading in and out of Manhattan are now closed as a precaution in the wake of the apparent attack on the World Trade Center. Anyone familiar with Manhattan and New York knows that the only way to get in and out of the city on the west side facing New Jersey is by way of the Hudson Tunnel, or the Lincoln Tunnel, that is, or the George Washington Bridge. And all those tunnels and bridges are now closed, as are all three airports in the New York area. JFK, the Kennedy Airport, LaGuardia, and Newark are reportedly all shut down now as a precaution in the wake of this apparent, will continue to say, apparent terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. Both towers continue to pour forth with great billowing clouds of thick black smoke. The fires seem to be dying down somewhat, but the rescue attempt trying to find survivors continues. You're listening to live coverage of the attack, the apparent terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. Live coverage coming to you from ABC News in New York. President George Bush calls this an apparent terrorist attack, not an accident. To recap, about an hour ago, a little less than an hour ago, one plane flew into the upper levels of the World Trade Center, one of the buildings. No warning whatsoever. The upper level exploded into tremendous amounts of flame and smoke. Shortly after, as television helicopters began to circle around that tower, that one tower of the Trade Center, they recorded incredibly a second aircraft flying into the picture and flying directly into the second tower of the World Trade Center. When it too then exploded into a great, huge ball of flame and smoke. No word on casualties yet. The rescue attempt of people continues at this hour, although it is an enormously difficult job. The planes crashed, as I say, into the upper levels, but there are floors above the crash point that appear untouched by the impact itself, so it's safe to assume that there are people trapped above the levels where the planes crashed, and certainly thousands upon thousands of people in the levels below where the planes crashed. This is an enormous event. We're going to continue now with our live coverage. Let's go back to ABC's Peter Jennings and ABC's Claire Shipman now reporting.
I've ever seen. I mean, we've never seen that kind of smoke coming from anything that would ordinarily occur here.
I must also tell you, Claire, I think if you think about what's behind the EOB there, you're really down in pretty open area. It doesn't look like a place where a building would be on fire.
No, that's right, although there are a number of buildings just behind the old executive office building on G Street that could potentially be on fire, but nothing you would necessarily... Apparently, we're also...
Claire, let me interrupt you for a second. We now have fire confirmed at the Pentagon. John McCarthy at the Pentagon can hear me. John, please get in touch immediately if you can and brief us in there. John McCarthy has actually been evacuated from the Pentagon, and parts of the Pentagon are indeed being evacuated. We want to hold our breath here, it just seems to me, for a second, and not get into a mode that the country is under attack. But we now have 2 attacks on the Twin Trade Tower Center. U.S. buildings, city buildings completely evacuated in New York City. We have this mysterious black smoke at the southwest corner of the White House, which is to say there's something going on behind the old executive office building. We now have a report that fire has been confirmed at the Pentagon. ABC's John McCarthy, our Pentagon correspondent, who's been plugging in as quickly to the intelligence and counterintelligence units there this morning, has been temporarily evacuated. But that is as much as we know for sure at the moment. John Miller, go back to what you're hearing on your nets.
Actually, it's interesting. In New York City, they're reporting on what we're seeing here also, essentially trying to tell everybody that heightened security is important now.
John, I apologize. There's a lot of us here. What are we listening to there? Say again. Say again, please. Come here, John.
Ed Compton reporting that bomb squads are checking out Air Force One before the president.
Good. So we have bomb squads.
I think you're going to see a lot of this, and I think we were talking about this a few minutes ago. In fact, when I was telling you that in New York they were evacuating the municipal building, the United Nations, Gracie Mansion, which is the mayor's residence, all potential targets, I suggested to you that shortly in Washington you'll probably be seeing the same kind of reaction at sensitive symbolic locations, and apparently that's become more than a concern, but perhaps a reality.
Okay, we do know, or at least the Associated Press is now reporting, that an aircraft crashed near the Pentagon, and the West Wing of the White House, as Claire Shipman told us, was evacuated amid these threats of terrorism. I guess first of all, let me go to another eyewitness. ABC's Bill Blakemore, one of our senior reporters, has been an eyewitness to the New York incident. Bill, you on the phone?
Yes, I am, Peter.
Go ahead.
I'm down at 12th Street. Looks like we're more than a mile north of this very surrealistic site, and business has completely come to a stop here. Looks like throughout lower Manhattan, people standing in the streets, cell phones aren't working. A few of these phone booths, such as I'm talking to you from now, are working.
One man just shaking his head said to me a few moments ago, I was supposed to be at a meeting in the building at 10:30 this morning, and then I saw the second plane hit the tower in this flash of light. There's a complete cessation of regular life. There's one delivery man standing here looking like he doesn't know where to go with this stack of beer crates. So all of Lower Manhattan is just standing in the streets on this sunny morning looking at this unrealistic sight in front of us, this gray smoke coming out of the Trade Center.
Okay, Bill, talk to as many people as you can. Call us back when you can. Let's return to Washington visually at the moment. Just take a look at that picture. That smoke behind the Executive Office building, which is right next to the White House, we now believe is from a fire in the courtyard of the Pentagon, or at least where an aircraft appears to have crashed in the general vicinity of the Pentagon. And now the Pentagon is southwest from the White House across the Potomac River, and what we think we may be seeing there, emphasis on think, is smoke in the distance rather than immediately behind the Pentagon. Precautions being taken everywhere. The U.S. Capitol is now being evacuated.
Your full-service cup of coffee. The Breakfast Club with Ross and Monica on Newstalk 780 KOH.
It is 6:48, and we are in the middle of a major national disaster. Two planes crashing into the World Trade Center in New York City. The first one just about an hour ago. Smoke coming from both towers. Eyewitness Steve Sterling lives just 6 blocks away, and he saw the first crash.
It's as if you drew the outline of a single-engine airplane onto the building. It looks like from here that it just plowed right in on a left banking turn.
There is no word yet on the extent of injuries. Evacuations continue. Emergency crews converging on the scene, as you can well imagine. Both planes, reportedly passenger planes. It is not yet known exactly how many people they were carrying. One said to have been hijacked out of Boston this morning. Meanwhile, we get word that an aircraft crashed near the Pentagon a short time ago, and the West Wing of the White House has been evacuated amid threats of terrorism. The president, who was in Florida at a school, has left and is now back on his way back to Washington. In Manhattan itself, life as they know it, a normal life, has come to a halt. Cell phones are out. Very few phone booths are working, communications, and pretty much everything has come to a halt. Again, an aircraft crashing near the Pentagon a short time ago. No word yet on any casualties there. There is a fire in the courtyard of the Pentagon. All of the New York area airports are shut down. JFK, LaGuardia, also the airport in Newark, New Jersey, and the Federal Aviation Administration now shutting down all aircraft takeoffs across the country. And we are in contact with our Reno Tahoe International Airport. We'll have a status report from them as soon as we can get it. Meanwhile, the White House and the Pentagon are being evacuated following those two plane crashes into the World Trade Center. Another explosion, as we mentioned, occurring at the Pentagon. Fire has been reported at the Washington Mall, and reports say that the Sears Tower in Chicago is now being evacuated as a precautionary measure. Live coverage of the World Trade Center terrorist attack continues all day here on Newstalk 780 KOH.
Breaking news when it happens on Newstalk 780 KOH.
We now join ABC News.
We have not been able to confirm, we've not been able to confirm precisely what happened. There is the Pentagon that is the courtyard of the Pentagon. The Pentagon is indeed exactly what it's described, just on the other side of the Potomac River from the Capitol, and there you see fires burning in the courtyard of the Pentagon, confirming what we'd been told almost immediately by eyewitnesses. We've also been told it was a plane crash. So our belief at the moment is that an aircraft has crashed into either the courtyard itself or into that particular side of the building. Parts of the Pentagon have been confirmed. You can hear it, just listen. That's what it looks like from just across on the north side of the White House. Those are the same incidents, to the best of our knowledge, the same incidents. And if you look at the amount of smoke at the Pentagon, this is huge. This is huge. The State Department is now being evacuated as a precaution. We're simply not able to get a good handle yet on what precisely happened at the Pentagon. But we do know that nowhere in the United States, at no commercial airport under the control of the FAA are aircraft taking off. And this is in large measure because it has now been reported by several news agencies that the first aircraft, I beg your pardon, the one of the two aircraft which crashed into the Twin Trade Towers just after 9 o'clock Eastern Time this morning was hijacked out of Boston. We do not know the airline. We're not able absolutely to confirm that, but there are several reports, and that led to the intense concern with the FAA and with the National Intelligence Services that all of the airspace in the general area of New York City, and now subsequently in Washington and everywhere else, be sealed as one would try to seal a building in order to prevent a third and fourth, whatever, incident similar to the first two. But that is the Pentagon, and as ABC's John Miller just reported a moment ago, the scene on the ground in New York City is still pretty chaotic. Emergency rigs, emergency services have converged on the Twin Trade Towers at the very same time that other high-profile buildings. Nancy Gabrino, I'm not sure. Do we know if the United Nations has been evacuated yet?
The police department on the New York side has ordered the United Nations evacuated. In fact, they did that very early on, almost immediately after it became apparent what was going on here. Right now, at the World Trade Center, the emergency units are reporting there's still debris falling onto the street on the east side of the building, including a second body which has fallen from the wreckage on the upper floors. They're also talking about people who are on the roof, and they've asked if the aviation unit from the police department can get up there and pick people up. But again, because of that smoke, as we discussed before, they're going to have real trouble edging in there.
As we look at the Pentagon, again, we have to say that sometimes the camera and the eye don't see precisely what is happening. We have now had eyewitness reports from our sources in Washington say they did see a plane crash in the vicinity of the Pentagon. We're looking at it from the Washington end, which would be to the east of the Pentagon, slightly to the northeast of the Pentagon itself. And it looks very much as if there is fire in the courtyard itself in that central quad. But you can see a small plume of smoke on the northern side of the building as well. At least I think it's the north. Yes, it is the northern side of the building as well. And we're not absolutely certain. The Associated Press, quoting a senior U.S. official, or quoting a U.S. official, is now saying affirmatively that one of the two planes that crashed into the World Trade Center was hijacked after takeoff from Boston. At this time of day, any number of aircraft taking off from Boston to go to ABC's John McWethy believes that it was an American Airlines flight number 11, bound for Los Angeles. And I realize when saying that, we're going to put the fear of God into a lot of people on the West Coast and people who know who are connected with that flight. But our Pentagon correspondent, John McWethy, just reports into us that American Airlines Flight 11, bound for Los Angeles from Boston, was actually hijacked out of Boston. That's a helicopter over the Pentagon. I apologize to the audience. We have two separate monitors here. They show different pictures. Can you tell me which one the audience is seeing at home so I can work with that? And may I not have to ask again? Thanks very much. I don't. And so we now have the first incident at the Trade Center and the second incident at the Trade Center as 2 aircraft. We know that one of them, we know at this moment that one of them, according to officials talking both to the Associated Press and a confirmation from ABC's John McCarthy at the Pentagon, that it was a commercial aircraft that was hijacked out of Boston, which could have been any time before 9 o'clock this morning, because the first attack on the trade tower was just before 9 o'clock, and the second one was after that. And John Miller, you're listening.
Actually, it's interesting. There's no way to characterize any part of this as fortunate. But if you look at cities who are prepared to handle an incident like this, and as you've seen New York's emergency response to this, it is probably one of the few places that is prepared with the kind of equipment, response, and rescue efforts that could actually address something like this. And Washington is probably the other. Immediately when this happened, the entire emergency service unit, which comprises hundreds of specially trained cops, was mobilized to the scene. Now a triage center for the injured has been set up just around the corner from the World Trade Center. It's an incredible scene down there with a tremendous amount of equipment.
The Federal Aviation Administration has actually gone even further than it did a few minutes ago. It was asking all planes not to take off. Now the FAA has ordered all aircraft currently in the air over the United States to land at the nearest airport. Now you can imagine what may be happening, or what they think might be happening in some part of the country, that there is somebody else on some aircraft coming from somewhere or going somewhere with evil intentions. And so all aircraft currently in the air over the United States have been ordered to land at the nearest airport.
I think
I just want to check one thing, because one of the very first people the president talked to was the director of the FBI, and Pierre Thomas, who covers the Justice Department and the FBI for us, has been here. They may think they prepare for this kind of thing, Pierre, but man, it must have been a shock.
Stunning shock. The FBI Special Operations Center is now in full alert. The FBI extremely concerned that there would be additional attacks. Normally when you have a situation like this, they immediately get on the line with the CIA, the various intelligence agencies, trying to get a sense of who might have been planning something. But right now, the first order of business is to protect against a second attack, third attack. The feeling is normally when you have this kind of situation, there will be more attacks almost immediately.
Let's go to the trade tower again, because John, we now have what do we have? We don't.
It looks like a new large plume of smoke.
Now, it may be that something fell off the building. It may be that something has fallen. We don't know, to be perfectly honest. But that is what you're looking at, is the current. That's the scene at this moment at the World Trade Center. Dan Daler from ABC's Good Morning America is down in the general vicinity. Dan, can you tell us what has just happened?
Yes, Peter, it's Don Daler down here. I'm 4 blocks north of the World Trade Center. The second building that was hit by the plane has just completely collapsed. The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the old demolitions of these old buildings, it folded down on itself, and it is not there anymore.
That should be it.
Thanks very much,
completely collapsed.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
That's the southern tower you're talking about.
Exactly. The second building that we witnessed the airplane enter had been, the top half had been fully involved in flame. It just collapsed. There is panic on the streets. Thousands of people running up Church Street, which is what I'm looking out on, trying to get away. But the entire, at least as far as I can see, the top half of the building, at least half of it, I can't see below that, half of it just started with a gigantic rumble, folded in on itself, and collapsed in a huge plume of smoke and dust.
We're talking about massive casualties here at the moment, and we have... That is extraordinary.
There is panic on the streets. There are people screaming and running from the site. The gigantic plume of smoke has reached me, and I'm probably a quarter of a mile north of there.
Peter.
Now this is what it looked like moments ago. My God.
It's Peter Jennings reporting from ABC News World Headquarters as we watch the entire World Trade Center, one of the buildings, collapse upon itself. A most incredible, horrifying sight. The building has simply disappeared in collapsing upon itself. Smoke and dust and debris now covers almost all of lower Manhattan. It is a most incredible sight. Here's Peter Jennings.
On purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
Peter?
Yes, Dan.
What appeared to happen from my vantage point, the top part of the building was totally involved in fire, and there appeared to be no effort possible to put that fire out. It looked like the top part of the building was so weakened by the fire that the weight of it collapsed the rest of the building. That's what appeared to happen. I did not see anything happening at the base of the building. It all appeared to start at the top and then just collapse the rest of the building by the sheer weight of the top. There was no explosion or anything at the base part of it, but I did see that the top part of it started to collapse. The walls started to bulge out, bricks, glass things coming out, and then it collapsed in on itself, and it appeared to just fold down from there, from the very top.
Breaking news when it happens on Newstalk 780 KOH.
You're hearing live continuous coverage of the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in New York. And moments ago, the second tower of the World Trade Center imploded and is literally just gone. The Federal Aviation Administration grounding all takeoffs from the nation's airports. The FAA says those airliners that are in the air will be allowed to land, and we may see some of that air traffic coming here to the Reno Tahoe International Airport. The White House and the Pentagon have been evacuated as smoke fills the air in the nation's capital. We did have reports of an explosion at the Pentagon. The helicopter report and thick smoke can be seen for miles around. These are the latest developments in what appears to be a coordinated series of terrorist attacks against the United States, starting in New York. The upper floors of both towers of the World Trade Center were hits after two planes crashed into both skyscrapers. Again, one tower is now completely obliterated. The FBI investigating reports of the possible hijacking of a 737. There were reports of a 767 American Airlines en route to Los Angeles before the crashes occurred. The president heading back to Washington from Florida at this time. The terrorist attacks, you may recall, at the World Trade Center, not the first one. In February of '93, an explosive device detonated in a van in a garage area beneath the Twin Tower complex. After that, the terrorist cell responsible said that their goal there was to bring down the buildings. It appears that they have been successful in at least one tower attack. Also, the effects of what are believed to be those terrorist attack being felt across the country. Air travel, as we mentioned, shut down at every airport across the United States. Tunnels, roads in, into, and out of Manhattan are shut down. Trading at the New York Stock Exchange suspended. The Pentagon, the Capitol Building, the White House, the State Department, and Treasury all evacuated at this hour. The President and First Lady have canceled the events they had scheduled for today. In addition to that, the Sears Tower in Chicago has also been evacuated as a precaution. Again, you are hearing live coverage of the apparent terrorist attack against the World Trade Center and indeed against this country on Newstalk 780 KOH.
Remind of the last bombing of the World Trade Center told me this story, that he was flying over the World Trade Center in a helicopter with the suspect, Ramzi Youssef, next to him after he was captured in Pakistan. And as they passed over, Lou Shalero nudged him and said to Ramzi Youssef, you see, it's still standing. And Ramzi Youssef smiled and said to the FBI's assistant director, it wouldn't be if I'd had more money. This was...
In other words, more money to buy explosives, more money to run a more efficient operation than the one he ran from New Jersey in '93.
Exactly. And I mean, we may have seen the second coming of that plan.
John McWethy is on the phone at the Pentagon. Let me just... John McWethy, we've now heard reports that 3 planes have been hijacked today. Can you confirm that? Jack McWethy at the Pentagon? Okay, then let me go quickly to someone named Don Wright, who saw the plane crash into the Pentagon. Don, are you there in Washington?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, it was about 9:35, and I was looking out our 12th floor windows at 1600 Wilson Boulevard in Rosslyn, Virginia, and I watched this. It looked like a commuter plane, 2-engine, come down from the south, real low, proceed right on and crashed right into the Pentagon.
Went directly into the Pentagon?
That is correct.
Looked like a deliberate act?
Deliberate act, sir.
And can you tell me what direction it came from, Don?
It came from the south.
Came from the south, up along the river, across the land?
It came from the south.
Okay, and did you happen to look at your watch? We thought it was just a little bit before 10 o'clock.
Well, I was watching ABC News, watching the Twin Tower, and about... could you speak to me, please? And about the time I saw the plane, I watched it come in very low over the trees, and it just dipped down, came down right over 395, right into the Pentagon.
And are you fairly sure that it was what we sometimes describe and recognize as a small commuter plane?
Yes, it was.
Good, Don. Thank you very much. Appreciate your help.
You're
Don Wright, an eyewitness to the crash at the Pentagon. Now, we have had, as I said, reports today. There are hundreds of reports flying around, and so we beg your indulgence on us saying as often as we do, these are reports. They're sometimes unconfirmed. They're sometimes confirmed. We'll try to make it absolutely clear what we absolutely know and what we're uncertain about. But there are now reports around of 3 aircraft having been hijacked today. So we have at least, because we've now had eyewitnesses to 3 apparently deliberate aerial assaults involving the aircraft themselves, 2 on the trade towers in New York City, and 1 on the Pentagon itself, just described by Don Wright as a small 2-engine commuter plane which came up from the south. And we now believe that 3 planes were hijacked, 2 of them from Boston and 1 from somewhere else. We are not yet sure precisely what's happened. John, you're listening. Just to clarify for people, John, who's one of our leading reporters on crime, knows New York City probably better than anybody in many news divisions. I cannot tell you where that happens. That's either U.S. Air Force or Navy aircraft, fighter aircraft, now on patrol in what we've described as the no-fly zone over New York City today, lest there be one more attempt. John, go ahead.
They've continued evacuations in the area now. They're evacuating Battery Park City, which is a large apartment complex taking up many blocks across the street from the World Trade Center. And they've evacuated the federal court buildings where the terrorism trials of Ramzi Youssef and others were held. Anything that could be a symbolic target is now being emptied out in New York. New York is going into kind of a lockdown mode. I think you'll also see in Washington the same kind of air patrols have been scrambled around principal buildings there.
Okay. We have on the phone one of those people who makes his living analyzing terrorism. Kyle Olson, do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
I wonder if on a day like this anybody wants to be thought of as an expert on terrorism. Be that as it may, and assuming that and knowing that much of the country is shocked at the apparent breadth of this, are you?
Well, this is the kind of attack that has fallen more into Tom Clancy novels than into actual response planning. Having said that, we've been anticipating for a long time. We've wondered why it's been so relatively quiet. The suggestions of Osama bin Laden's involvement. What has he been doing since Cole? Other groups out there with a real or imagined grudge against the United States. The nature of the event is shocking. The fact that it's happened is not.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Really appreciate it. Kyle Olson.
Yeah, one quick thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
One quick thing. The suggestions that are floating around out there right now. There's apparently this claim from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
Right.
Very interesting to note. If this is legitimate, if this claim stands up, this appears to be the first time this group has targeted Americans. This group has primarily steered away from the more extreme end of the violence scale. They focused less on suicide bombings, more on gun attacks and that sort of thing in the territories against Israelis.
Well, if
this holds up, this is a very different tactic.
Well, if it is true, and of course the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine was very much involved in attacking aircraft in the 1970s, which carried Americans. So certainly would accept your notion that it's a recent attack on Americans. Thank you, Kyle, very much.
You bet.
As Mr. Olson makes clear, there has been at least one claim, and those of us who cover this for a very long period of time are always suspicious of claims. People who cover international terrorism. I'm going to interrupt myself. Linda Douglas, our Capitol Hill correspondent, I think is on the phone, and if she's not, she already reports there has been an explosion of some kind at the Capitol. Is Linda Douglas on the telephone? Let's get her on the phone as quickly as we have. She just reported a couple of minutes ago that the leaders of the Congress, Senator Lott, Senator Daschle, the Republican and Democratic leaders in the Senate had been taken to some undisclosed secure location. Our general assumption is that there's no panic involved in this.
One of the things that law enforcement officials had been planning for is the notion of a multi-tiered attack, an attack occurring in multiple places simultaneously. Because one of the things they've talked about is that terrorists want to project more fear, as much fear as possible, and one of the ways you can do it is to have this notion that attacks are happening on multiple fronts.
Yeah, well, and we've never seen anything like this before in the United States, of course, and in fact, not seen anything like this in my recollection. I've been doing this for 30-some-odd years. I don't recall any multitude of attacks. We've had two or three. We've had two suicide bombers in a short period of time in the Middle East. We had the two embassies in Africa, in Kenya and in Tanzania, the attack 2 summers ago in the United States. But the notion that the terrorists, either an organization or organizations, plural, should be able to mount a concerted effort against the United States in this way, causing in this instance so many casualties, in the instance of the trade tower certainly so many casualties, is going to astound people in the political and military and intelligence establishment.
Absolutely. The notion that you could have multiple attacks like this, they had been planning for it, they had not seen it. This is a extraordinary escalation, one that they were predicting would happen, but no one would think that would happen this quickly.
Okay, John Miller?
I think...
let me just interrupt. I apologize again. We're now looking at a helicopter over the Pentagon. That makes perfect sense this morning. But given the fact that we're all sensitive to the presence of any aircraft, that was a helicopter that just flew across the screen. That is, and as we had at least one eyewitness said this was an attack on the Pentagon from the south. He described it quite confidently as resembling a commuter aircraft, which is to say smaller than a small private aircraft and not as large as a commercial jet. It may have been a prop jet. It may have been a jet, but it's a smaller version of the jets which so many people in so many middle-sized American cities are now accustomed to seeing.
In terms of the realm of terrorism, this is going to be a real first test, literally by fire, for the Bush administration. You recall, after the embassy bombings in East Africa, the Clinton administration waited about 10 days and launched a missile attack against the camps of Osama bin Laden, who they felt confident at that time they could say was responsible for it, and who's since been charged in it. In this case, I think this ratchets up.
Excuse me. This is the Pentagon we're looking at now, according to my monitor. And again, it is hard to grasp what part of the building. We do not know if they're in the courtyard or outside, but you can see that a fairly considerable amount of damage has been done. We do not know whether these are offices or storage areas. The Pentagon is full of many thousands of people.
You're listening to live coverage of an apparent terrorist attack on the United States of America. Live coverage from ABC News. I'm Jim Hickey in New York, joined by my colleague Karen Chase. Just to recap now, there have been 3 apparent attacks that we know of. 2 in New York, 1 at the Pentagon in Washington. Shortly before 9 o'clock Eastern Time this morning, a plane flew into one of the twin towers of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan and exploded on impact. About 20 to 25 minutes later, as TV cameras from helicopters were rolling, a second aircraft flew into the second twin tower, the South Tower, and it too exploded on impact. About an hour after that, a third plane reportedly flew into the courtyard of the Pentagon, and it too exploded on impact. All 3 buildings are currently on fire. There are untold numbers of casualties. We have no idea how many casualties there are now, but thousands upon thousands of people work in both towers of the World Trade Center, and now there is only one tower of the World Trade Center. The South Tower has completely collapsed upon itself. 110 stories have collapsed into Lower Manhattan. There is an incredible amount of smoke and dust covering all of Lower Manhattan. ABC producer Ruth Davis is in Lower Manhattan. Ruth, can you describe the scene for us, please?
Hi, Jim. I was down here. I had just made my way down to the area of the World Trade Center. I could look up and see twisted metal in the building, flames coming out, and I was chatting with the police and the FBI, trying to figure out what was going on a bit. And then suddenly there was a huge rumble, and every emergency person there grabbed a civilian and dashed us down the street ahead of a huge choking cloud of smoke. It was ash, it was debris, it was smoke, it was fire. We could not see the hands in front of our faces. We were people shouting out to each other to beware of subway entrances so that we didn't fall down the stairs. We made our way around the block. It seemed like quite a long distance, but apparently it was just around the corner and into the lobby of a building here that was open. The lobby was in seconds full of people choking and coughing. There were some firefighters here with in more serious straits than most of us. Right now, a lot of these people have cleared out. The smoke and debris have cleared out, but I haven't been outside yet to see what's left of the building.
How far away are you, Ruth? How many blocks away did they...
Just a few blocks.
And that was obviously what you're describing is the collapse of the tower.
The collapse of the tower. I'm told by the police that that's what happened. I couldn't see it, and you couldn't. Within seconds, you couldn't see anything.
And it's not even clear now, is it?
No, it's not.
Ruth, is anything moving at all in that part of New York City? From the pictures that we are looking at, it appears that there is smoke and debris covering almost all of Lower Manhattan.
That's what's happening. It's cleared up enough now. The air is clear enough out here. The air is clear enough here to see what's going on. But I have to go. There are some people here in dire straits who would really need to use this telephone.
Okay, we certainly understand. ABC's Ruth Davis reporting live from Lower Manhattan. Now, we said that second building, the South Tower of the World Trade Center, collapsed upon itself. Karen, it didn't appear to me that there was a second or a third explosion. It appeared that just that the structural damage of the building from the plane crashing into the upper levels of the building eventually weakened it so much that it just collapsed.
And in fact, Ruth describes a rumbling. She did not describe an explosion as the building came down, pretty much right over her head almost. And so I would think that we don't have any, sound evidence of an explosion.
And as we say, about the time that was happening, a third plane crashed into the courtyard of the Pentagon in Washington. That is now on fire. At least the courtyard is, or part of the Pentagon is. We've seen some pictures of casualties being taken away in ambulances. Karen?
I have been, just got off the streets of the city on my way to work, and I spoke to a number of people. They are scared. Some were shaking. Some were crying. I saw more than one parent racing back to school to collect their kids. People were watching the sky as they were walking. And though we are dozens of blocks away from where this World Trade Center thing is happening, I saw a steady stream of fire trucks and ambulances from the minute I walked out the door to the minute I got here. It's just the entire city is being called in to rescue what they can or to respond to this emergency.
Now, President Bush has called this an apparent terrorist attack on the United States of America, and we heard a few moments ago from an expert that was talking to Peter Jennings that a faction known as the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine had claimed responsibility for the attacks. However, later word now, a senior official from the DFLP denies any connection. The man's name is Taysir Khaled. He's a senior official from this radical Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. He says, he emphasizes that the story on Abu Dhabi TV in the United Arab Emirates is totally incorrect.
Breaking news when it happens on News Talk 780 KOH.
You're hearing live special coverage of the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, indeed the terrorist attack on this country, as two planes hit the World Trade Center earlier this morning. Also a plane crashing into the courtyard of the Pentagon, and the White House being evacuated as a state of shock and disbelief has spread across this country this morning. One of the towers of the World Trade Center in New York City collapsed after those two apparent terrorist attacks against the landmark buildings. The upper floors of the Twin Towers of New York's World Trade Center still engulfed in thick black smoke and flames. After one plane hit one of the buildings, another aircraft hit the other tower just about 20 minutes later. The first crash happening at about 5:45 our time.
The FBI is investigating a report of a hijacking shortly before the catastrophe. There are reports of one of the aircraft involved appeared to be a commercial jetliner. An eyewitness says one of the planes appeared to have a blue logo on its side. And a visibly shaken President Bush calls the crashes a national tragedy. He has told an audience in Florida where he was supposed to talk about education this morning. He's calling for a full-scale investigation to hunt down whoever is behind this terrorist act. He also observed a moment of silence. Bush is now heading back to Washington to deal with the tragedy.
The crashes at the World Trade Center occurred at about the time many people would be reporting to work. Again, Eastern time, it would have put it at just 8:45. 50,000 people work in just those two buildings in Manhattan. It is not clear how many people have been killed or injured, but obviously many have. Manhattan has been sealed off in the wake of the tragedy. The New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street, which is not too far away from the World Trade Center area, has been evacuated as a precaution in the wake of the crashes. The NASDAQ has not opened for the day, and it is not clear when or if those financial markets will reopen. Meanwhile, the Lincoln Tunnel and the George Washington Bridge leading into and out of Manhattan have been closed down. The FAA ordering all airports across the country closed down, and at this hour, the Reno Tahoe International Airport is at a standstill. No flights into or out of, except those planes that were flying at the time. All planes have been ordered to land at the nearest airport, and we will probably see some of those aircraft coming into Reno. Meanwhile, the Nevada National Guard's Cindy Kirkman reporting no scrambling of the Air Guard. However, she does say that they are on alert status and tightened security, and we'll have more on that for you as our continuous coverage on KOH unfolds here.
As we reported earlier, an enormous plume of smoke can now be seen rising from the Pentagon. It's not clear if the blaze is coming from the office building itself. Witnesses say they heard what sounded like an explosion. The White House and the U.S. Capitol are being evacuated, and there are reports of a fire on the Washington Mall.
And again, we will stay with this story all day and all week, however long it takes, to get you all of the latest breaking developments on Newstalk 780 KOH, and those listening to our sister station, Cable 98 FM. We now have another explosion being reported outside the State Department. This one said to be, what, a car bomb, Monica?
A car bomb is said to have exploded outside the State Department. Senior law enforcement officials are confirming that for us.
All right, 724, Newstalk 780 KOH.
breaking news when it happens on Newstalk 780 KOH.
On the ground. But again, we don't know precisely the size of the aircraft. We won't speculate on that. But Lisa Stark, who covers aviation for us, confirms that it was American Flight 11 to Los Angeles. There were 90 passengers and crew on board. And there was a second plane. Help me understand this now. So we believe that the two aircraft have flown into the trade towers. Both belonged to American Airlines. And they had both been hijacked. And there were 90 passengers and crew on the first plane and 60 passengers and crew on the second plane. That is if there's any doubt about that, someone please contradict me, but that is the report I am getting from our people who cover the Federal Aviation Administration and air travel in general, that there were two aircraft hijacked for this attack on the twin trade towers, now the single trade tower in New York City. And on the first, there were both flights to the West Coast from Boston, and the first one had 90 people and a crew on board, and the second had 60 passengers and crew on board. I beg your pardon. The second plane was not hijacked from Boston, but from Dulles Airport, we're being told, which of course is outside Washington, and we do not know if that was the... I'm going to make this absolutely clear because this reporting gets muggy. We've now reports of two planes from American Airlines, one from Boston, Flight 11 to Los Angeles, which we believe is one of the aircraft that went into the trade towers. We have a second plane, American Airlines Dulles to Los Angeles, with 60 passengers and crew, and that is certainly bigger than a small commuter aircraft, so it may also be involved in the... And we'll do our best to hand that down as well. Senior law enforcement officials in Washington now tell us that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. That's it's a report now from the Associated Press, about to confirm it with our own people at the State Department, though everybody in Washington has been evacuated from their buildings. But a car bomb has now exploded outside the State Department. And John Miller, I see you writing quite frantically on something else.
It's at the scene now at the World Trade Center. Because of the concerns of the structural stability of the remaining tower, a temporary headquarters mobilization point triage center was set up at Stuyvesant High School, which is about 2.5 blocks up and slightly across the street. Now the concern is that if the building falls, if the second building falls, that it will be falling in that direction. So they are now evacuating their own command post and triage center, and they have to find an even further zone to move that to. Something that is striking about this today is that this is indicative of, with a car bomb at the State Department, a plane crash into the Pentagon, two planes designated to crash into each tower of the World Trade Center, bringing one down. It connotes the level of planning and sophistication and extreme logistical ability that probably makes this singularly the largest, most well-coordinated act of terrorism, not just in U.S. history, but probably
in modern times.
In modern times.
Yeah, and
unprecedented. And it's going to be...
And every time you say that, I'm going to go immediately to Washington now, but every time you say that, I keep thinking of how we are told time and time and time again by the Pentagon and by the State Department that they know something's going on in the world today.
They seem to have the problem at the North Tower, Peter.
Let's look at the North Tower quickly.
Seems to be coming down.
Oh my God.
The second tower.
It's hard to put it into words, and maybe one doesn't need to. Both trade towers, where thousands of people work, on this day, Tuesday, have now been attacked and destroyed, with thousands of people either in them or in the immediate area adjacent to them. There is simply no way to accurately describe the emotion this evokes in people all over the world, friends of the United States and enemies of the United States as well. John Miller, very briefly, you said to us just a few minutes ago that this was their concern, that they thought after the first tower went that the second one was vulnerable.
There was constant intelligence that terrorist organizations, and specifically that financed by Osama bin Laden, was trying to mount another series of attacks against the United States. Of course, they thought of the symbolic targets. The most symbolic was the World Trade Center because it had been attacked yet not brought down. And it seems that those concerns that even caused the World Trade Center to hire a senior FBI counterterrorism official just weeks ago to try and beef up security have come home to roost. It's also interesting to say that there is no type of security
which would have prevented against this today. Well, that may not. I was going to say that may not all be able to be true because security operates in waves and concentric circles out around the world. Now we've lost the picture from there, so now we have it again. Well, wherever you are in the United States or in the world today, you can. The landscape of New York City has just been changed. And one has to assume that thousands of lives have been extinguished.
You're listening to live coverage from ABC News. Tragedy unfolding in New York and in Washington, as Peter Jennings just described. The second of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center has now collapsed upon itself. We can see smoke and debris drifting out over New York Harbor, passing poignantly, I have to say, in front of the Statue of Liberty, Karen, as we watch the smoke drift out over the harbor. Thousands of people work inside those twin towers every day. You can only assume that thousands of people were in there when the planes attacked the building.
You're hearing live continuous coverage of the terrorist attack on the United States, starting with two airplanes into the towers of the World Trade Center at approximately 5:45 our time this morning. 50,000 people work in those two towers. We do not yet have a count on fatalities or casualties, but you can bet that there will be a very high number of people out of that 50,000. Good percentage of them perhaps lost their lives this morning. We, as you have heard or perhaps did not hear, the second tower of the World Trade Center collapsed moments ago. Both towers, the World Trade Center is no longer in existence at this hour. We will continue to bring you the latest all day on the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center and indeed this country. Explosion at the Treasury Departments, also a fire at the Pentagon where a small plane reportedly crashed into the courtyard. The Chicago Board of Trade has been delayed. The NASDAQ, Wall Street's not open at this hour. And the White House, the Pentagon, and the Treasury Department all have been evacuated as smoke fills the area in the nation's capital now. An explosion reported at the Pentagon helicopter port, and thick smoke could be seen for miles around there. The Federal Aviation Administration grounding all takeoffs from the nation's airports, including Reno, Tahoe International. This is the first time such an order has been given. The FAA says those airliners that are in the air will be allowed to land, some of which may land here. They're supposed to land at the nearest airport. FAA spokeswoman says the national grounding will last indefinitely. Monica?
President Bush labels today's events a national tragedy, an apparent terrorist attack. Bush is heading back to Washington. He made his brief comments in Sarasota, Florida earlier this morning.
And have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
President Bush added, terrorism against our nation will not stand.
And in our conversations among our staff in the newsroom, this really has been observed by several of us independently, all reaching the same conclusion. This is the Pearl Harbor of our generation.
Exactly.
Our coverage continues as we now rejoin ABC News and Peter Jennings on Newstalk 780 KOH.
Months, if not years, to work out, Karen.
Yes, and indeed we did have one claim of responsibility by a Palestinian group. However, when that group was telephoned, the leaders of the group denied responsibility.
That's the DFLP, right?
That's correct. So we really have no clue at this point as to who may be responsible for it. No one has formally claimed responsibility and confirmed it.
You're listening to live coverage from ABC News. For those of you who have just joined us, we'd like to recap. Three airplanes have crashed into American landmarks this morning. Two planes into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. The third plane into the courtyard of the Pentagon. Both Twin Towers in New York, both of them 110 stories tall, incredibly have disappeared. They have collapsed upon themselves into mountains of rubble, a monstrous pile of cloud of smoke and debris drifting out now over Manhattan and over New York Harbor. At the Pentagon, fires continue to burn. Smoke continues to float out over Washington. There was a report of some kind of incident at the Capitol. We're unclear about that. And a report of a car bomb outside the State Department. However, we do not know the extent of that. All these events are breaking even as we speak. There's a great deal of confusion between here and New York. President Bush, who was in Florida, has canceled his Florida trip where he was pushing his education program. He's headed back to Washington. Secretary of State Powell has shortened his trip in Peru. He is also on his way back to Washington.
And indeed, before President Bush got back on Air Force One, security did a second sweep as a precaution before the president boarded the plane. Again, the president has called it a terrorist attack. And part of the reason for the confusion between Washington and New York is that many of our colleagues who are in those buildings, in the Pentagon, in the Capitol building, and even in the White House, were hurriedly evacuated. So they can't even tell us what's going on in some cases because they've been hurried out of the buildings.
Earlier, we talked to an eyewitness, Brian Lutz, who was in a building near the World Trade Center. He was on the upper floors of one of those skyscrapers in his office building. And although, Karen, he was inside the building, he said he could feel the heat from the explosion when the planes crashed into the buildings and blew up in a huge fireball upon impact. He could actually feel the heat through his windows in the building. Two of the planes, are we clear yet? We don't know if the third plane yet was hijacked or where it was hijacked from.
No, but we do know that when it did crash at the Pentagon, it crashed on a helicopter landing pad. It did not land in the courtyard. It landed on a helicopter landing pad, which is just outside the Pentagon. It's just on the edge of the Pentagon building, close to the highway. And it caused a very smoky fire. There's also there was smoke reported at there we are watching live coverage of it on television. The smoke is still pouring out of the Pentagon building, so and that is a huge building as well, and our colleagues were evacuated from there as well. So
and we can also see now pictures of firefighters in New York just wandering around now because there's virtually little more they can do. However, the firemen, the firefighters, and the civilians are all covered in white, chalky dust. They are just wandering around, it appears, in a daze. No fires to put out anymore. The buildings are gone.
And that's correct. We should also point out that the two planes hit the buildings probably an hour and a half ago. Is that correct? And it took about an hour for the first one to fall down, and then the second one came down in a huge cloud of smoke and ash. And one of our producers was in the dust was in among those being herded away hurriedly from the first one as it disintegrated into the ground. And she said she couldn't see her hand in front of her face, and it was quite terrifying.
At the risk of sounding trite, Karen, we're looking at a picture now that no Hollywood producer or director could conceive. A picture of Lower Manhattan from across the harbor, taken from Staten Island.
and all of Lower Manhattan is obscured by smoke and dust. It is a surreal picture. It looks unreal.
As a matter of fact, some of the people that I spoke to on the street said they thought it was a movie. It didn't seem real to them. They thought that someone was, pulling some sort of a prank, or this was a movie stunt or a publicity stunt, and they still couldn't let it sink in. They still couldn't believe it was happening, and I think a lot of people in the city feel that way. It's hard to believe what you're seeing.
It's incredible. Now the firemen, there are two firemen hugging each other. There's quite nothing more for them to do. A third one is on the ground behind them, retching and coughing because of all this smoke and debris. Now we're getting a report from the Associated Press that a large plane or multiple large plane crashes in western Pennsylvania. We're getting this from officials at Somerset County Airport in Pennsylvania. We know nothing more about that. It's large plane crashes in Pennsylvania. No idea whether this is tied in to what is happening here this morning.
Is this one large plane that's crashed or several large planes?
Well, that is unclear at the moment. I'm going to try to find out a little more about that, but the only line we have now, large plane crashes, rather a large plane crashes rather than multiple large plane crashes in western Pennsylvania. If this is indeed connected to what has happened here this morning, it is quite clear that the United States is under attack, Karen.
That's correct. We do know that the two planes that crashed into the World Trade Center tower were hijacked. They were both American Airlines flights. Perhaps that was done for the symbolism. They carried a total of 150 people, 90 people on one plane, 60 on the other. And we have no idea how many people were in the towers at the time the planes crashed into them, or the times when
we were told
the building collapsed.
You're listening to live coverage of this apparent terrorist attack, coordinated attack on the United States of America. We continue our coverage with ABC's Peter Jennings, who's now speaking with ABC correspondent Rebecca Cooper.
Where I was, and I will tell other mothers and fathers of people who work at the White House and reporters who work at the White House that most of the White House has been evacuated. In fact, in the building where I am now, people have cordoned up other offices to try and coordinate the federal response to this. There are actually phone calls being placed to the legal counsel of the FAA from this building because they don't have cell phone connections. They are out of their offices. They are doing a good job of coordinating the federal response from here, but they are having to take all kinds of emergency measures to coordinate this response. But even the White House chef, who just days ago was preparing a lovely state dinner for President Fox of Mexico, I saw him and I tried to speak to him. And frankly, Peter, he was too rattled. He said he couldn't speak, and he was with his staff, and they were all very anxious and very worried because, of course, they did know what's going on in the country today.
Many thanks, Rebecca Cooper. And if you just see that picture that was going by as Rebecca was talking, you get a real sense of what the urgency was in the White House. First of all, the White House police came walking out, and then people began to run out of the White House. In and of itself, astonishing, because we live with the notion that if there is any place in the United States which is fiercely protected, including an anti-aircraft battery, at least one on the roof of the White House itself, this is the place where the president and the vice president, of course, are to be secure. Claire Shipman is on the phone from the White House. Claire, we are now looking at what appear to be fairly relaxed security officers on the roof of the White House, looking in the distance as they always do, talking occasionally to each other. There doesn't seem to be a high level of tension there. What's it like on the ground?
Well, there's considerable tension on the ground, Peter. We are actually looking at a similar picture because we're across the street from the White House now in the Hay Adams Hotel. The entire area around the White House has been completely evacuated. It's very quiet. The police seem tense. They're carrying automatic weapons. We've also seen a couple of what appear to be fighter jets overhead. Everybody in this area has been sent home from all major government offices. It's a reverse commute. The highways, we're told, are just jammed. As you know, President Bush is on his way back to the White House. They've checked his plane considerably before sending him on his way. But as you mentioned, These guys on top of the White House roof are almost always here, and ever since that incident a few years ago when a plane actually landed on the White House lawn, they've upped security measures so that they wouldn't have any other aircraft nearby. And that may be why they seem a little more relaxed than other areas around town. As you know, the AP has been reporting that there was a car bomb that went off at the State Department, and a lot of people are talking about that. And there's also been some report that there were bomb threats on Capitol Hill, but we're still trying to find out more about that, Peter.
Thanks very much, Claire. There are indeed reports from the Federal Aviation Administration that there are possibly...
Breaking news when it happens on Newstalk 780 KOH.
We will rejoin Peter Jennings and ABC News in just a moment as we continue our coverage of the attack on America this morning here on Newstalk 780 KOH. Well, the World Trade Center is no more. The Southern Tower collapsed with a roar about an hour after this morning's twin plane crashes into the New York City landmark. Then the Northern Tower went down in flames and billowing smoke. One witness said earlier that he saw bodies falling from the 110-story towers and people jumping out. WCBS television in New York quoting witnesses who say 5 or 6 people jumped out of windows. People could be heard screaming every time another person leaped. New York officials say about 50,000 people work in those buildings. There is no word on the number of injuries or fatalities. Obviously, that number will probably be very high. Monica?
Ross, one survivor of the World Trade Center bombing tells a story of near panic as the first of 2 planes hit the Twin Towers this morning. Matthew Garth was in his office below the upper floors where the first plane crashed into one of the 2 towers.
There was a big shaking. Some of the ceilings collapsed. Looks like there was a fire in the elevator shafts. And they brought everyone down and started bringing everybody down the stairs.
The borough of Manhattan remains sealed off as hospitals and all essential services are in high state of alert. As many as 50,000 people, as Ross reported earlier, work on a daily basis in the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center.
Well, Matthew Garth, as you heard, witnessing that, we have then had an order from the FAA to ground all aircraft. All airports across the country are shut down, including the Reno Tahoe International Airport. Only planes that are still up in the air are being allowed to fly. And we are getting reports now that 1 or 2 planes, other than military, are still in the air, and possibly because those planes have been hijacked. Reports earlier that a hijacked plane, Fox News reporting that a hijacked plane, Capitol Police confirming, was en route to the Capitol. Again, 1 or 2 planes still in the air, possibly hijacked aircraft. And officials at Somerset County Airport in Pennsylvania say a plane went down just north of the airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. It is not known if that is connected to this morning's terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. The White House, the Pentagon, the Capitol, the State Department, and the Department of Treasury have been evacuated as smoke fills the air in the nation's capital. Again, an explosion reported at the Pentagon helicopter port. There are unconfirmed reports, again, that we have a hijacked plane en route to the nation's capital at this hour.
On the local front this morning, the 9 a.m. meeting between the Reno City Council and the Washoe County Commissioners has been canceled.
And if you're wondering about the school situation, the classes are as usual at the Washoe County School District, although district spokesman Steve Mulvenin said you can bet there are going to be a lot of kids on the sick list today, my 2 included. An unarmed United States Air Force RQ-18 Predator unmanned aerial vehicle on a routine mission in support of Operation Southern Watch has been reported missing now this morning in southern Iraq. That aircraft may have crashed or been shot down. The United States Central Command says there are no plans to recover the aircraft. No sensitive technology will be compromised by not salvaging that aircraft. Not known, again, if that, too, has anything to do with developments in this country. Our continuous coverage on Newstalk 780 KOH comes your way all day right here. So keep it here to Newstalk 780 KOH for the latest. I'm Ross Mitchell with Monica J. And our special coverage now continues as we join Peter Jennings and ABC News.
Otherwise, I would have been there. They're still trying to understand how they're so lucky not to have been over there. There must be thousands of such stories here this morning, Peter, of those that were the lucky ones.
Thank you, Bill. Please stay in touch as often as you can. It's now 10 minutes to 11 Eastern Time, 10 minutes to East in 2 minutes to 8 in the West. And I'm just going to add to the chaos and the trauma of the day by saying that a large plane has now crashed just north, or shouldn't I say just, but crashed about 10 o'clock in the last 15 minutes north of Somerset County Airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. This is reporting from one of the Pittsburgh television stations as a result of a 911 call from the airport itself. There are no other details on this crash yet. And it's not clear whether the crash was related to anything else that has happened in the country today. But the plane, which was believed to be a Boeing 767, crashed about 10 a.m., just about 8 miles east of Jennerstown, Pennsylvania. People in the area will undoubtedly be reporting in more clearly to us on that. The New York mayor's race is having a primary today. That has now been canceled. Both on the Republican and the Democratic side, there was I apologize for interruption. Somebody's trying to say something. Go ahead, please. Okay, just stand by just for 1 second while I just finish. Just repeating, the New York mayoralty primary has been canceled today, and as we said, there's reaction coming in from the Middle East, including a claim of responsibility, then a denied responsibility, now a message from the Palestinian President Yasser Arafat condemning the aircraft attacks on the World Trade Center and sending the condolences of the Palestinian people to those who have been victimized by it. Outside the Pentagon, another member of our ABC News staff, Chris Dreer. Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Peter.
So would you tell us what you can see?
Yes, Peter. I'm standing at the fringe of Arlington Cemetery watching the Pentagon as the top of it caves in. There's a lot of black smoke, a lot of twisted debris. The Pentagon itself has caved in from the top. There is much fire coming out of the windows. It looks like something from World War II, Peter.
Chris, can you tell me, it's a little hard to tell on television, how much of the building has collapsed? How wide is it? How deep is it? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, I do, Peter. The center portion of the Pentagon appears to be breached. That is, apparently there's a courtyard, and of that is completely caved in from where I am, from where I see it.
Okay, I think you're on a cell phone, Chris, but just confirm for me that a portion of the building has been breached and the aircraft appears to have pushed its way through into the courtyard?
Yes, indeed it has. I believe, Peter, that that's where the plane is, but I am not sure at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Is there any evidence, is there any movement around there at the moment? We're looking at a fairly static picture. Are the people arriving, people disappearing, ambulances coming?
Peter, there's a great deal of massive wind fire coming out of the windows. But on the other side of the Pentagon is where most of the emergency vehicles are now. I'm going to try and get around to that side to see what I can see. Okay, thank you very much. I should tell you that all military personnel in the District of Columbia area now, all military personnel in the district, are now on something that is called Threat Level Delta, which is the highest state of alert in the military, and all other military personnel in the country are now on alert status Charlie, which, John Miller, we know is a somewhat lower status of alert, but still a reminder that this disaster has spread like wildfire through all of the political and military establishment in the country. All museums and monuments in Washington are now shut for the day. It's ironic to hear Claire Shipman telling us there that tourists are still standing around waiting to get into the White House today.
not surprisingly, unfamiliar perhaps with what has happened everywhere else, though, as it was, for example, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, word spread dramatically, mouth to mouth, person to person across the country in a huge a wave of information and emotion and confusion. And now I just want to sort of, as often happens, to contradict some of the earlier reporting from Washington. Our State Department sources now believe that there was no car bomb at the State Department, as was reported a little earlier by a number of sources in Washington. We believe there was no car bomb at the State Department. So the State Department at this point is free of violence, but it has been evacuated, as has the Congress, as has the Treasury building. And we've told you several times that the leadership of the House and the Senate, at least the Senate anyway, have been taken to a location which is deemed to be secure. There is still some concern among our intelligence sources in Washington that one more aircraft somewhere is unaccountable, or is unaccounted for, I should just say. Pierre Thomas, I know you're talking as best you can under the circumstances to all of your sources in the FBI. This is your beat. What are they telling you, if anything?
Well, early on today, they were saying that they thought that there was at least one hostage situation in terms of the plane being hijacked, but they were scrambling just as we are, trying to get additional communication, trying to get additional information, and that's one of the problems early on in a disaster like this, is they're trying to get the information in, they're trying to sort through what they have, and then make decisions based on that.
Okay, but
you're listening to live coverage of these unfolding events from ABC News with Peter Jennings in New York. I'm Jim Hickey, along with my colleague, ABC correspondent Karen Chase. Karen, Palestinian President Yasser Arafat has now checked in. He is condemning these aircraft attacks on the World Trade Center and on the Pentagon. He sends his condolences, and I quote, "the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American president and his government, and to the American people for this terrible act." Arafat goes on to say, "We completely condemn this serious operation. We were completely shocked. It's unbelievable, unbelievable, unbelievable." And that's a direct quote from Palestinian Chairman Yasser Arafat. The smoke continues. The state of affairs we were seeing just a moment ago on a split screen on ABC television coverage, the state of the nation, thick gray smoke pouring up from the World Trade Center and white smoke pouring up from the Pentagon as both areas continue to burn and continue to collapse. Claire Shipman at ABC News reported a short while ago that it appeared that the ceiling, at least a part of the Pentagon, was collapsing. Total pandemonium, total chaos, not only at the Pentagon, but here in New York, where both Twin Towers have collapsed. That was the sound a little while ago as police tried to get people out of the way.
And indeed, one of our producers, ABC's Ruth Davis, happened to be standing nearby when the first tower collapsed, and we had not heard from her until now, since the second tower collapsed. Ruth, are you there?
And I'm here. We're a little further uptown than we were before, and there is just nothing to see of Lower Manhattan right now. It is just a huge cloud of thick gray smoke. That is all you can see when you look downtown.
Were you anywhere near the second tower when it collapsed, or had they herded you even farther away?
I was a few blocks away. It was, and in fact, when the second tower collapsed, it was not as bad for me as it was when the first one came down. When the first one came down, I was enveloped in a cloud of smoke so thick I couldn't, you couldn't see the ground. You couldn't see anything.
And when the second one came down, did you hear any explosion?
Just a rumble and just a big rumble. And then there's the cloud of smoke, and everybody in Lower Manhattan by then was experienced enough with this cloud of smoke to look around and see what direction they could go to get away from it.
And what are people doing? Are they stunned? Are they crying? Are they just trying to get away?
Well, there's a variety of responses. There are people who are in shock. They're standing on corners crying. There are long lines of people at every telephone. Cell phones don't work at all. As far as I can tell, cell phone service has been cut off. So everybody is trying to find their relatives, their coworkers, their colleagues, their friends, to see if or to tell people that they're okay and to find out if other people are all right. There are people walking in fury, but mostly it's total disbelief. Mostly people are looking down there and saying, are they really gone?
ABC's Ruth Davis live from the collapse of the second World Trade Center tower, recapping both World Trade Center towers have been felled, both hit by commercial aircraft that were apparently hijacked and flown into the buildings. The collapses happened probably 45 minutes after the attacks. We have also had a plane attack on the Pentagon. We have part of the roof of the Pentagon caving in on one side. We have a 767 that has crashed in western Pennsylvania. And we have two more planes the FAA says is missing and may have been hijacked. The FAA has grounded all planes in the U.S.
And Karen, it's the most incredible sight. 110 stories, both buildings that tall, both buildings collapsing upon themselves. It's just a sight that I thought just astounding to see. We're watching replays of this now as the building just crumbles like so many dominoes or like Legos falling over. And one of our colleagues, Al Jones, was down in Lower Manhattan when that second tower collapsed, and here's what he reported.
We were standing on the street when we heard what sounded like a plane coming overhead, but actually it was the roar of more of the building coming down. People running down the street, screaming, this huge dust cloud filling the sky. We dipped into one of the buildings here. A supervisor, lucky enough, opened up the door, let us in as this huge cloud went by of debris, and you could hear the roar of the building continuing to fall.
ABC's Al Jones in Lower Manhattan. Now, Karen, victims from the attack on the World Trade Center are beginning to arrive at hospitals. We're finding out many of these victims are suffering from extensive burns. One doctor at St. Vincent's Hospital in Greenwich Village, that's in Lower Manhattan, says hundreds of people are burned from head to toe. About 50 or 60 doctors and nurses are standing by in scrubs and uniforms waiting for the next wave of ambulances.
You're hearing live coverage on the attack on the World Trade Centers this morning, indeed the attack on this country by unknown terrorists on KKOH Reno and KBUL Carson City.
Collapsed
upon them. And we're watching the live coverage of the rescue crews herding some of the walking wounded out of the area, everyone covered in ash and debris. We see some police officers with gags over their mouths, cloth over their mouths, because it's apparently so smoky that the entire skyline of Manhattan is all but obscured by the smoke. Again, both World Trade Center towers collapsed in a heap of ash and smoke, like a sickening fireworks display that went horribly awry.
President Bush has cut short his trip to Florida, where he was pushing his education program, immediately got back on Air Force One to head back to Washington. Before he left, however, he had a comment about these attacks, and here's what the president said.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I unfortunately will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary of Rod Pace and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at the Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
President.
Breaking news when it happens on Newstalk 780 KOH.
You're hearing live continuous coverage of the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center and indeed on the United States on Newstalk 780 KOH and KBUL 98.1 FM, our sister station. In addition to the two planes crashing into the World Trade Center towers in Manhattan this morning, a large plane has crashed in western Pennsylvania. Officials at Somerset County Airport say the plane went down just north of the airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. That plane believed to be a Boeing 767. It went down at about 7 o'clock our time, about an hour ago, 8 miles east of Jennerstown. The crash came after this morning's attacks on the World Trade Center, and then another plane crash at the Pentagon in Washington. It is not clear if the crash in the Pittsburgh area is related to the other, and there is no word on injuries or fatalities in that one. Meanwhile, my colleague Monica J. has been following the story as well and has other aspects for us. Monica?
Well, there are other buildings closed around the nation, including Chicago's tallest building, the Sears Tower. Mike Scott tells us what it's like in front of the building.
People are leaving the building, and police are smoothly directing traffic away from the Sears Tower. There seems to be some confusion over whether the tower has been evacuated or if simply business has been closed for the day. Needless to say, storefront business signs all say closed due to the circumstances of the day at the Sears Tower. Mike Scott, Chicago.
A horrific series of attacks today on landmark buildings in Washington and New York. Terrorists have crashed two planes into the World Trade Center in New York. Both of those buildings have collapsed, 110 stories tall each.
There is no word on the fate of the 50,000 people or so who work in the World Trade Center Twin Towers, but witnesses reported seeing bodies falling from the building and some people jumping. One of the planes that crashed into the building had been hijacked after takeoff from Boston, an American Airlines flight en route to Los Angeles. An explosion has also rocked the Pentagon, an aircraft crashing on a helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon. The White House being evacuated amid threats of terrorism. President Bush in Florida at the time of the initial plane crashes in Manhattan. He is on his way back now to the nation's capital, and as we mentioned, a large plane, the 767, a Boeing 767, has crashed near Pittsburgh, and it is not clear if that crash is related to the others taking place this morning.
Authorities from coast to coast are on alert, halting air traffic and evacuating high-profile buildings. In Los Angeles, police have mobilized an anti-terrorist division. Evacuations have been ordered at the Sears Tower in Chicago and at the UN building in New York.
And we understand, although not confirmed, also the John Hancock building in Chicago. How is this affecting things here in the Reno area? Well, the FAA order to shut down all airports, that includes, when they say all, that includes the Reno Tahoe International Airport. We may also have planes who are not scheduled to land here coming here in the wake of that order to find the nearest airport and set down. The joint meeting between the Reno City Council, the Washoe County Commissioners this morning has been canceled, and we are now getting word now that the Reno City Council meeting scheduled for noon today has also been canceled.
Now, those meetings have been canceled out of respect and not fear during this situation. It's a very tragic situation for all of the nation. As we had mentioned earlier, we've all been sitting talking about this during the live coverage from ABC News. For our generation, this is our Pearl Harbor.
Indeed it is, and we suggest if you have an American flag, now would be a good time to fly it if you are not flying it already. In the wake of the two planes that crashed into the World Trade Center, the director of the Office of Criminal Justice and the dean of the College of Criminal Justice at Sam Houston University, Dick Ward, says no one should jump to any conclusions as to just who is responsible.
Sure that the FBI and the other agencies are putting together groups to look at both the domestic angle as well as the international angle. And what they'll do is do what we're doing, just lay out what the possibilities are. We've had experiences in the past where we made assumptions and they turned out to be wrong. A good example is the Murrah building. Everyone thought that was an Islamic group.
Dick Ward, again at Sam Houston University, the College of Criminal Justice. He is a former New York City detective who has been studying terrorism for the past 20 years. Ward says this will make Americans want to get tough on terrorism.
You know, after we get through the outrage and the fear and what have you, it's going to just support the notion that we need to really pay attention to terrorism as a problem.
Ward also adds, no matter how prepared you think you are, it's always a surprise.
And it seems that every time we find a way to strengthen, or what we would call harden our defenses, the terrorists find another way to launch an attack. This was a possibility. A number of people thought about it, but it raises a whole lot of other issues as to what you do in this kind of a situation.
And international flights, meanwhile, into the U.S. are being diverted to Canada. That is the latest information from the FAA. Meanwhile, in an unprecedented move, the FAA has initiated a national ground stop, as they call it, an NGS for an indefinite period. And that means that all outgoing airliners, private planes for that matter too, will not be taking off anywhere in the country. Airlines that are already in the air are being allowed to land. In precautionary measures, the White House, the Pentagon, the Capitol, the State Department, the Treasury Department have all been evacuated. And as we mentioned, an explosion reported at the Pentagon helicopter port earlier this morning. Again, on the local front, the City Council meeting scheduled for noon today canceled. The joint meeting between the Washoe County Commissioners and the Council this morning canceled, and as Monica said, out of respect, not out of fear. The Washoe County School District reporting all classes are running on schedule as normal. However, district spokesman Steve Mulvenon said that no doubt there will be a large amount of children on the so-called sick list this morning. The Reno Tahoe Airport is closed, no flights in or out, and the Nevada National Guard, the Air Guard, Cindy Kirkland, reporting that they were not scrambling. However, she was anticipating, and it probably has happened already, an alert status and certainly tightened security later today, if not already. And that is the latest as our coverage of the terrorist attack on this country continues on KKOH, Newstalk 780, and Cable 98.1 FM. I'm Ross Mitchell with Monica J. We now join ABC News and Peter Jennings.
All been evacuated this morning. Everyone in those buildings has been told to go home until further notice. An unprecedented attack on the United States of America. We continue our live coverage now with our colleague ABC's Peter Jennings.
Persuasion of eyewitnesses, journalists on the ground who have been party to seeing this thing and are beginning to piece together for us the human dimension of how horrendous this is. And this, of course, is Times Square, in which you can imagine that people have stopped, and this happens to be the ABC News screen in Times Square, which at a time like this, as Times Square has always been for more than a century, it's always been a place where people gather to see the news. But Drew Milhon, ABC News' Drew Milhon, actually saw this happen, and I believe, Drew, you're on the phone at the moment, am I correct?
Yes, Peter, I'm here.
Would you go ahead?
Sure. I was at the corner of Varick and Canal, which is about 10 to 12 blocks north of the World Trade Center, where roughly 300 to 400 people were gathered watching the flames and the smoke from both World Trade Centers going through the air. And I began to cross the street, and I heard a collective scream from this group of people. And I looked up, and the first World Trade Center that collapsed was falling down. The shriek lasted for quite a long time, and then many of these people fell into tears, just crying and sobbing. I don't know where my mother is. I don't know where my friends are. That sort of thing was heard all around this crowd.
Okay, Drew, where are you at the moment? You're in the same location?
Yes, I am. I'm at Varick. I'm just north of that now. I'm at Varick and Canal.
And people are not familiar, people from outside New York are not familiar, but you're at the lower west corner of the island of Manhattan. And is that whole lower part of Manhattan being either evacuated or people just leaving it en masse?
It is being evacuated. No cars are allowed south of Canal, which is basically the last major thoroughfare that goes east to west on Manhattan. After the first Trade Center went down, I tried to get closer to the scene, and police and FBI agents were telling everyone, both plainclothes policemen and uniformed policemen were telling everyone they had to go north of Canal. They were pushing everyone back.
Okay, thank you very much, Drew Milhon. Please check in with developments. I can tell you that the reports that we now get from a variety of places, let me just stay with the map of New York City, because the New York City Emergency Management Center is, if you're looking at that map, is just like on the tip of the building there to the north. Both those buildings have gone.
And at a moment like this, they and the political establishment in the city, as well as the state and federal authorities, would coordinate operations from in there. And there are other, as you look around the Manhattan itself, as far up as the Williamsburg Bridge and beyond, of course, is the United Nations. People have always been concerned that at least two of the tunnels, the Holland Tunnel for one, the Lincoln Tunnel is not on that map, but these are the tunnels that go across the Hudson River to New Jersey and out onto the west, and that even perhaps the bridges. But elsewhere in the city, City Hall would be vulnerable as well. The United Nations, the tunnels, and of course FBI headquarters, which is about in the middle of Manhattan, not too far from the New York Stock Exchange, which you cannot see on that map at the moment. But there was nothing, John Miller's with me still, thank you very much, and I'm glad you are, nothing more patently, obviously vulnerable than the trade towers.
Or no larger set of symbolic targets. It's what they mean. They stand for American commerce. They stand for the American establishment, and in some way, just by their size and profile, American might. And the fact that they were an earlier target and that they withstood that, I think, made them even a more attractive target the second time around.
You can see people, and again, I'm not quite sure what we're looking at here, and I wish somebody would put pictures up. Okay, this is clearly a New York fire rig, and communications are extremely, extremely difficult, as you can imagine, in a circumstance like this.
One of the things
sometimes what you get is a picture that is either taken from a different angle or of a different thing.
One of the things they're grappling with here is what is the crime scene. They've been talking about that today. The crime scene unit responded expecting that they'd have a massive crime scene, the World Trade Center tower, then two towers. Then the two towers collapsed, making their crime scene not only much more difficult to process, but massive. Consider the prospect of sifting for evidence, trying to find the black boxes, the in-flight recorders, evidence of other explosives there.
Let me stop for just a sec, John. We'll come back to the notion of crime. But ABC's John McQuethy is at the Pentagon. John, can you hear me? Jack, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Peter.
John McQuethy, just go ahead and tell us what you know, what you've seen, how much information have you been able to put together?
Peter, this is one of those things that you dream of in your worst nightmares. It appears that a large jet aircraft, perhaps the size of a large passenger plane, came very low, clipping off light poles as it approached the Pentagon. It slammed into the side of the Pentagon, and it drove itself from the outer ring all the way to the inner ring. The area of the building that it went into burst into flames. There are many, many floors of destruction deep into the heart of the Pentagon. That area has now collapsed. The firemen have been there trying to put out the flames. There are obviously heavy casualties at the Pentagon. There have been ambulances and helicopters coming and going for the last hour. The area has been cordoned off. The skies above the Pentagon, there have been F-16s circling. The entire area has been evacuated. More than 20,000 people work in the Pentagon, Peter, and this is a disaster.